Hello, and welcome back to Bombchu. Today we'll be taking a look at the Humble Choice bundle from July 2020. Hopefully, things are getting better for most of you out there, but this virus is surging pretty hard around Bombchu headquarters, so we're spending the 4th of July inside and playing more games. Let's see if Humble brought us some good ways to pass the time.
This month's sneak peek is Popup Dungeon, a roguelike RPG from developer BBB Titles and set for release in August of this year. Popup Dungeon is a fairly straightforward and simple roguelike RPG, with players moving their party members around a grid and a turn-based combat system. Abilities are represented by cards, but thankfully this isn't another deck-building card game. The classes and abilities are fairly simple fantasy RPG archetypes, and serve the function of making the RPG numbers look a little bit more interesting. The art style is a cardboard cutout style, reminiscent of something like Yoshi's Story, and it's pretty charming. While the little amount of gameplay in the demo isn't anything amazing or worth writing home about, the game also teases their extensive creation tools. It seems that, in the full release, players will be able to create their own characters and abilities using pretty much any picture and text description, and the game will be able to import them into the game's cutout style, while also balancing the finer details of the abilities for whatever level character or creature is currently using it. The story design, writing, and even quest programming is supposed to be simplified into a drag-and-drop interface that seems like it could result in something really cool in the right hands. While I would normally forget about this kind of game as soon as I was done recording for this video, the promises of the creation tools has certainly piqued my interest for sure. It won't be something I pick up at launch, but if there's enough quality community creations that get made, I just might have to pick up Popup Dungeon at some point in the future.
This month's Humble Original is Grotto. The Humble Original is a good spot to put games that are experimental and way out there, and in that way, Grotto is a great fit. It's a weird game. You're in a cave. Villagers come to visit you to get advice on important decisions. To answer, you must look up at the sky through a hole in the ceiling to try and form constellations. Trying to come up with new constellations involves some guesswork, but once you unlock one, you can look at it on the wall to see what it represents, and hope that you have one that fits well with the advice that you want to give. And it seems you just keep doing this. After answering a few visitors, you can go throw some bones to get a reading, and then repeat the process. As far as I can tell, there isn't much more to the game. All of this is what's shown in the game's trailer online. It's got a cool art style, but the controls are a little wonky, and while forming the constellations is pretty generous with interpreting shapes, it's tedious to have to remake constellations you've already used in the past when you need to use them again. This one wasn't for me, but maybe there was something lying just a little deeper that I missed. Earthlock is a nostalgic return to turn-based RPGs around the turn of the century. Thankfully, some of the annoyances of games from that era have been streamlined here. 20 minutes into the game, I was fighting the boss of a small dungeon, rather than still bumbling around my hometown trying to figure out which NPC to talk to next to progress the story so I could leave. There are no random encounters, you can see enemies on the field and choose to run away, or you can tap a button to trigger the fight early and get the first turn. The more enemies you round up at once for a fight, the bigger your experience bonus from winning. You can start interacting with the battle menu before the animation from your opponent's attack finishes, and there's a fast forward button to make battles pass much faster in general. And the music. It's really good music. And what's cool is that going into a battle doesn't interrupt it. It swaps to a different version of the song, usually livelier or including different instruments. It's a cool little touch, and you can tell whoever worked on the music for this game was passionate about the work they put in. As far as I got, the story is fine so far. Environments are pleasing to look at, and there's a character upgrade grid that seems like it'll be interesting to progress. But at its core, this is still a turn-based RPG, and if those aren't for you, I don't know that the streamlining and the music here are going to be enough to make you have a good time. If you grew up playing RPGs in the PS1 and PS2 era, this might be worth checking out.
Warning, I'm probably going to say this game's name wrong, because I'm an American, and Google was not helpful in figuring it out. Just like how I said Gaiden last month, you're just gonna have to deal with it. Anyway, Basingstoke is an isometric survival roguelike game from developer Puppy Games and released in 2018. Basingstoke begins with your character visiting some kind of facility, and this normal visit quickly erupts into chaos as some kind of alien zombie creatures begin their attack on the town. Gameplay has you moving through different randomly generated stages in an attempt to get to a safe house. Levels are overrun with monsters, and your combat options are fairly limited. You'll spend most of your time either trying to use stealth to get around, or just running and frantically gathering supplies as you go. You don't seem to have access to any real guns, and your melee options are slim at best, but there's plenty of different tools and gadgets at your disposal. You'll also use some of the items you've gathered to craft more powerful and useful gadgets as well. Getting to a safe house means a checkpoint for your progress, and also allows you to store some of the items you've collected thus far, as your inventory space is limited. Death will reset you back to the most recent safe house, minus any items you had collected on that run since leaving. Actually, the deaths might be one of my favorite parts of this game. Basingstoke features a charming voxel art style, and seeing the cute and simple characters be eviscerated in horrible and creative ways is always a treat. The presentation is really all this game has going for it though, as I'm left feeling horribly underwhelmed by everything else Basingstoke has to offer. Sure, all the pieces are there to make a great game, but it just doesn't seem to fit together quite right. Stealth seems to be the way they want you to at least attempt approaching the game, but the mechanics just aren't there to make stealth feel satisfying or rewarding. That, combined with the limited and indirect by design approach to combat, leaves every level and encounter feeling either too easy to avoid or just not fun to engage with. If the voxel art style and roguelike survival gameplay sound like something that would appeal to you, you might be able to have some fun with Basingstoke, but I just felt like I wanted something more from this game, and I probably won't be playing anymore.
Verlet Swing is a first-person hookshot game with a vaporwave theme to it. Your goal is to reach the end of each level without your body touching anything. You can hookshot on structures as well as these glowing orbs in the air. I gotta tell you, I vibed hard with this game. The hookshot feels really great to use, especially when you start getting to levels with fast, tight turns. And boy do I love me some vaporwave. The aesthetic, the music, all of it. Oddly, vaporwave is supposed to chill you out, and this game gets me really tense, but in a good way. I do wish there were some other tracks in the game, but at the same time, you can mute the music, throw on a lo-fi station, and have a ball. If you like surrealism, vaporwave, or tight platformers with hookshot mechanics, pick this one up. It's a lot of fun, even for me and my old man reflexes.
Don't Escape: 4 Days to Die is a point-and-click game developed by Scriptwelder Studio and released in 2019. Well, I say it's a point-and-click game, but Don't Escape is more of a weird mix between point-and-click and a survival game. Players start the game waking up from a nightmare into a fittingly nightmarish landscape where the moon has been destroyed and the world lays in ruin. In my first playthrough, the threat I was faced with on that first day was an ominous toxic cloud, but there is apparently a number of different disasters and obstacles that the player can face each day. The gameplay is a fairly simple and straightforward point-and-click interface, with the left click to interact and right click to inspect different objects. You have a limited inventory, and can use items on things or try to combine them with other items, as you might come to expect from a point-and-click adventure game. However, there's not a whole lot of trying to figure out what item to use on what, as the game usually just tells you exactly what tools you'll need to try and do the thing you're attempting to do. Your main goal, of course, is survival. Luckily, at least for the first part of the game, there doesn't appear to be any kind of hunger or thirst meter to try and handle, although I'm sure food, water, and other resources will come into play at some point. Instead, the main resource you'll be keeping an eye on is your time. Each day only has so many hours for you to try and get ready to survive the night, and many tasks will require time to complete. Luckily, the game gives you plenty of heads up that the thing you're trying to do is going to take some time to finish, and tells you exactly how much time is needed and how much time you'll have left in the day. So, armed with this limited bit of knowledge, I found an old farmhouse and started sealing it up as best as I could. I managed to scavenge enough supplies to run the farm's sprinkler systems, which apparently would help me disperse the gas cloud coming later that night. I even managed to get an old car running. However, when it came time to settle in for the night, even though it seemed like I had done everything I could to survive, I still fell victim to the gas. Death, at least early on, doesn't seem to be too much of a punishment, as I was just reset to the time right before I decided to end the day. This makes experimenting with the game a lot of fun, though it does leave certain actions feeling just a little bit inconsequential overall. Again, this is all just from the first day in the game, and I'm hoping to see some of these mechanics get expanded on as my attempts at survival continue. I was really surprised by this game, as the idea of a point-and-click survival game sounds dreadful, but I ended up having a lot of fun. Don't Escape: 4 Days to Die keeps things simple but still interesting, and is definitely worth checking out.
Metal Unit is a 2D action platformer with some gorgeous pixel art. And I'm not talking about the boobs and butts, which are aplenty. Although, hey, there they are. You play as Joanna, who is trying to protect humanity and seek revenge against her sister and the alien machines that took her from you. Thankfully, you can pilot a mech, and a very agile one at that. You can find or purchase equipment for a melee and ranged attack, a skill item, a super, as well as armor and a passive attack item. You also have a dodge that allows you to pass through several enemy attacks in flashy fashion. Translation, you can attack the hell out of your enemies and look super fly doing it. I haven't died yet, but there are apparently roguelite elements here where if you die, your equipment is turned into research points to spend unlocking new items and skills. So far, the story really hasn't gripped me, but the cutscenes have still had enjoyable moments and helped show the personalities of each character and their connections to each other. Not to mention, that pixel art. Damn. It's fun to play, and it's nice to look at. It's still in early access, but the final chapter of the game is scheduled to come out this month, and there's a full release on the books for October. I'll recommend any 2D action platformer fans to pick this one up for sure. Sigma Theory is a turn-based strategy game in which you are racing the rest of the world in technological advancements for control of the singularity. You'll pick a home country, which will determine what benefit you'll receive, and then hire 4 operatives to work for you. They have strength and intelligence stats, which are each useful for different situations, and they have different traits that affect them as well. Like one may be a very good hacker who is socially awkward and unable to seduce targets. While picking your 4 people, you'll have to read their profile carefully and convince them with a fitting dialogue choice before they will agree to help you. Once you start, you can send your operatives to other countries to gather intel, steal scientists, or generally run amok. If your people get caught, you'll lose the trust of other countries, which will make operations and negotiations tougher. You also have to manage your own country's confidence in you by being effective and efficient. Upset enough countries, and the doomsday clock will count down to midnight, resulting in the destruction of the planet. The goal of the game is to complete research on 15 technologies before any other country, so you'll want scientists to speed along research, hackers to steal research or slow it down for other countries, and intel on your fellow leaders so that you can benefit from negotiations. It has a cool look, and it works more easily than I thought it would, though I had trouble with my operatives frequently failing their actions, which left me a little flustered. If you like more complicated board games, or you like the idea of strategy games with political intrigue but get turned off by how complicated they usually get, this may be up your alley, as it never gets to be too much to wrap your head around. The RNG can just be a little too punishing for me.
Beat Hazard 2 is a twin-stick shooter from developer Cold Beam Games and released in 2018. Beat Hazard 2 takes any music track you want and uses it to provide extra flair and flavor to a typical twin-stick bullet hell shooter arena. However, in possibly the best feature I've seen in one of these games that uses your music library, it also supports streaming music through whatever desktop app you want to use. All you have to do is hit play, wait for the game to be ready, hit play on the song, and the game will identify the song and appropriate leaderboard as well. All without having to manage any MP3 files or navigate a central database of songs. It's such a breath of fresh air to how it's handled in games like AudioSurf, and it streamlines the entire process. The gameplay itself is fairly simple. You fly your ship around with the left stick, shoot with the right stick, and use the triggers and other buttons to fire screen-clearing bombs or other sub-weapons. Each time you complete a song, it can unlock a ship specific to that song, each with their own stats and design. It seems like it tries to make the ship fit the song in some way, which doesn't always work, but I did get a pretty sweet looking ship that had a purple colored light show coming out of it after I played a Prince song. For me, that alone is worth the choice pick right there. Completing levels also allows you to purchase and upgrade different perks, which can give you bonuses to your score, upgrade your weapons from the start, and unlock new sub-weapons to use. I absolutely love Beat Hazard 2. I'm already a sucker for twin-stick shooters, but adding in the ability to supply my own soundtrack and having the game provide feedback based on that makes this one of my favorite games that's ever been in a bundle. If you just want to sit back, relax, throw on your favorite playlist of music, and blow stuff up, you definitely need to spend some time with Beat Hazard 2.
Yuppie Psycho is a horror adventure game in the style of some of the old RPG Maker horror games that we used to see, but this game is polished up real nicely and free of the chains that come with RPG Maker games. It's your first day of work at Centricorp. You aren't even sure if your job offer is real, especially when weird things start happening all over the office building once you get there. As your character puts it, there's a lot of red paint. Like, a lot. Now, while this is a horror game and it did make my stomach drop a few times, it's also a pretty funny game at other moments and had me laughing out loud a number of times. It's such an interesting mixture. Be forewarned, there's a good amount of gore in this game, as well as some themes that some people may find upsetting, like murder and suicide. Also, this game has Resident Evil-style saves, as in you need a couple of consumable items to save your progress, which can definitely be stressful. But if you're down for the ride, I would say give it a go. I've been fascinated so far, and I have no idea where the story's going to take me. Oh, and it's got an excellent soundtrack from Grotto, the guy who did the music for the bartending game Valhalla. Battlestar Galactica Deadlock is a 3D turn-based tactical strategy game set in the First Cylon War. If you aren't familiar with Battlestar, it's okay, though you should totally go watch the 2004 TV show. The tutorials and interface are actually surprisingly well done and pretty intuitive. If you have watched the show, you'll be a little bit more comfortable with some of the terminology and the 12 colonies. That said, the story is pretty boring as far as I've played, and I don't think anything should really be trying to ride the name of Battlestar Galactica anymore at this point. But enough about all that, what's the game like? You can move your fleet in 3D, plot your trajectory, adjust elevation and yaw, but too much yaw and your ship will be overextended. You can send out fleets of Vipers to fight smaller dogfights around your bigger ships. Vessels have armor on the left, right, back, front, top, and bottom. So if you focus one side, you can crack through the armor and start damaging the hull. If you take damage, you'll want to make sure you repair your subsystems so you aren't caught with your pants down. Most of your actions are on a right-click menu specific to each ship, so you don't get overwhelmed with a ridiculous user interface. However, despite fixing a lot of the issues I have with space strategy games and being based on a TV show that I love, combat feels too tedious to enjoy, and the story had me falling asleep in my chair. If you're looking for a space strategy game or a fix for some more Battlestar, this isn't the worst choice you could make, but I also feel like you could do better elsewhere on both fronts.
Railway Empire is a railroad tycoon management sim from developer Gaming Mind Studios and released in 2018. Railway Empire tasks players with constructing a network of railroads with the general goal of connecting the United States and making a profit along the way. The game starts by blasting the player with old-timey western folksy charm, with some great music and visuals that are stylized but still a treat to look at when it comes to the fine details. It does the job of setting the tone and getting players in the right mindset, even if it does come on a little strong out of the gate. The game also kinda glosses over the whole backstory of the railroad's expansion during the 1800s and early 1900s, so don't expect to learn much real history here. They try really hard to just brush right past the dark and sordid history of the railroad, and while I get that this is just a game and it's not trying to be historically accurate in that aspect, it's still kind of hard to ignore when the intro cutscene talks about all the hardship the workers faced, while just pretending that everyone there actually wanted to be there by choice. Either way, as I said, this is not what Railway Empire is here to do, so I'll try not to hold it against them. Players are tasked with building railroad stations at various towns and farms across the United States and connecting them together. The little details of building tracks and connecting stations can get complex very quick, but luckily Railway Empire features a very well designed tutorial. The voiceover and highlighted menu buttons will tell you what you need to be clicking and when, and there are also pop-up video players in the area of the objective that will show you exactly how and where to place certain objects. This comes in handy often, as the mechanics of this game are pretty complex. Busy tracks will need side tracks for trains to get around without having to wait at the station for the entire rail to be clear, and these side tracks need markers to designate one-way sections of track. Long sections of track will need things like supply stations to keep the trains running. Each town will have different goods in demand by the people, and satisfying these demands will earn you money and also allow the towns to grow. Eventually you'll be able to purchase upgrades via a tech tree, expand the services offered by your railroad, and even open your own manufacturing buildings in each town. It can be a lot to take in, even with the very helpful tutorial, and it's going to require a lot of patience to be able to really settle into a groove with Railway Empire. While I can appreciate the depth of the mechanics at play here, there's just nothing here that's going to keep me interested in playing too much more. A tycoon management game really needs the right subject matter if it's going to get me to learn the mechanics and really sink my time into it, and the thing is, I've just never been a train guy. For me, the only time trains in a game are interesting are when I'm robbing them, or when you're just trying to get CJ to follow the damn train. If you're into trains, you're probably going to absolutely love this game, as the attention to detail and presentation is really top-notch. The same goes for fans of the tycoon management genre, as there's a lot of deep and interesting mechanics to balance and master. However, the combination just doesn't work for me, and the individual elements aren't strong enough to keep my interest. Void Bastards is a first-person shooter roguelike game developed by Blue Manchu and released in 2019. Void Bastards places you in the shoes of a newly awakened prisoner aboard a spaceship full of other frozen prisoners and run by an AI. Your job is to scavenge for parts from other ships as you make your way towards a nebulously defined destination. Each ship has a randomly generated layout, and you're given a map of the general area to look over before each level to try and plan out your approach ahead of time. Sometimes you'll just be grabbing food and fuel to keep you and your ship going, while other locations will offer parts that can unlock new weapons and tools, as well as key item locations that will continue the overall story. Void Bastards was worked on by former members of the BioShock team, and you can definitely feel that influence in how you approach problems. Sure, you can just run through, shoot enemies in the face, and grab loot as you go, but that's probably not going to be your best option. Instead, Void Bastards wants you to use the environment to your advantage. So far, my preferred approach has been sneaking my way to the helm, getting the detailed map of where the loot is, revealing enemies on the map, and trying to maximize the loot I grab while minimizing the number of enemies I engage with. At least as far as I've gotten so far, the combat doesn't feel great, so trying to avoid combat as much as possible has given me the most enjoyment. Guns don't have the right kind of impact or feel that I was hoping for, and I just didn't find the moment-to-moment gameplay all that satisfying. The cel-shaded art style is really cool, however, and getting to see different locations and creatures was one of the factors that kept me playing. Overall, while I have my issues with the game, Void Bastards still ends up being fairly enjoyable. There isn't anything too deep or innovative going on here, but it's still a competent FPS roguelike hybrid with a great art style, and a pretty good sense of humor as well. I'll be giving Void Bastards at least a little more of my time to see if it can sink those hooks in any deeper. Age of Wonders Planetfall is a sci-fi themed 4X strategy game developed by Triumph Studios and released in 2019. Planetfall has players taking control of different races in their path to explore, expand, exploit, and exterminate. This game is going to look immediately familiar to anyone who has ever played a Civilization game, with the UI and overall look and feel of the game looking almost exactly like a mod for Civ 5. You'll be moving units around on a hex-based map, building cities, fighting armies, and going for either a military, diplomatic, or science-based victory. There's no denying it, this is Civilization with the coat of sci-fi paint. Now don't get me wrong, I don't mean that in a negative way. If you're going to make a 4X strategy game, Civilization is a very good starting point. Planetfall takes that starting point and expands on it in some really interesting ways. The most obvious difference is the combat. When your units get into a combat situation, the game goes into a sort of XCOM light combat mode. You'll move your units around a smaller map, hiding behind cover and fighting against the enemy in turn-based combat. Different types of units will have different abilities, and your commanders can be leveled up to learn unique and powerful combat abilities as well. The combat mechanics are pretty solid. Even if they aren't as deep or as involved as they would be in something like XCOM, it still manages to get the job done and keep things interesting. However, if you play Civilization anything like me, the combat might seem too small-scale and detailed for a 4X game. Luckily, at least outside of the campaign, you can solve any combat with an auto battle, which will generate combat results instantly and even manually retry combat if you don't like the results. Oh yeah, this is a 4X game with a campaign, by the way. A fairly full-featured campaign as well, with a number of different story options depending on what race you want to play as. Planetfall isn't all improvements on the Civilization 4X formula, however. While I'm used to Civilization games throwing a lot at you and expecting you to figure it out as you go, Planetfall goes a little too hard in some areas. Expansion isn't quite as simple as just building new cities, as you can also acquire nearby biomes as well as building new colony centers, and the whole thing just doesn't feel like it's explained all that well. Luckily, the overworld and pop-up tooltips offer plenty of guidance to where and when you should be building these kind of structures, but the control ends up feeling like it's out of your hands. Your paths to victory also feel a little restricted by the somewhat slow rate of expansion, which feels crippled by the aforementioned biome system. The sci-fi setting also feels just a little lacking in terms of depth or variety. It's not awful, but it feels like the regular character and creature tropes you might expect in an average sci-fi setting. Despite these flaws, Planetfall does a lot to grab my attention. It takes a lot of the groundwork laid by the Civilization series, expands that with a more in-depth combat system, and wraps it up in a sci-fi bow. It's probably never going to replace my eternal devotion to the Civilization series, but Age of Wonders Planetfall ticks enough of the right boxes to keep me coming back for more. So overall, how does this month's bundle stack up to the rest? Well, that much needed variety we got last month doesn't seem to be an ongoing trend, as there's a lot of repeated genres here. We've got 4 strategy games, 3 games with roguelike elements, and a couple RPGs as well. All we're missing is a deck building card game, and we've got the full Humble Choice starter pack. However, once I stop being overly harsh and dramatic, this really does feel like a month full of hidden gems. Not a single one of these games was even on my radar, and yet I feel like I've got more games this month that I'm actually going to spend time with than I usually do. Even if I do wish there was more variety to the genres.
I'm in agreement with Chris. There were a lot of strategy games here, which is a bit of a turnoff for me. However, I have been meaning to try Yuppie Psycho for some time, and Beat Hazard 2 has been on my wish list. And you know I'm very happy to have found Verlet Swing and Metal Unit.
Also, last month's mystery game was revealed to be Boundless, so don't forget to grab that as well. While these mystery games still haven't been anything too amazing, and I wouldn't expect anything to break that trend for this month's mystery game, it's still a nice little added bonus for each bundle. If you want to know how much each individual pick is worth, here's the retail price of each game. If you want to know what Austin and myself dropped for this month, I ended up dropping Battlestar Galactica Deadlock, as well as Earthlock. I've never been a huge fan of modern Battlestar, and that game just looks way too slow for me. Earthlock just had the unfortunate luck of not looking as interesting as some of the other games available.
I will change Chris's mind on modern Battlestar, so say we all, but I support his decision to drop Deadlock. If I didn't need to redeem it to play it, it would have been a contender for one of my drops. I ended up dropping Yuppie Psycho since I already owned it, and I also plan to drop one of the strategy games. I'm not sure which one yet. Hey, did you know that 65% of our views come from people who aren't subscribed to the channel? If you're not subscribed and you get some value from these reviews each month, consider subscribing. It's free and it really helps us out. Clicking like on the video if you enjoyed it also helps a lot.
A huge shout out and thank you to Michael Slater, Charlie Grant, and all of our other glorious patrons over on Patreon. Your support is what makes this possible. Thanks for watching.